Hello and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton's Communications Department. And today we're going to talk about how to talk to your kids about money, how to teach your kids about money. My guest is Alvianne Lyons. Welcome.
Hi.
This is a good one. This is a fun one. It's a little, it's an important lesson and value to pass on to your kids.
Absolutely. And it's one that's going to be useful to them for their entire life. It's the conversation that they're going to need both internally and externally as they matriculate through all kinds of things in life. Knowing what to do with their money is going to make a world of a difference in their success as human beings.
It is. And some of the studies that they've done about high school education or college education should teach kids about personal finance. I think you should do that in the home. I think college is for other things, and home is where you learn a lot of those life skills.
I agree. I think that it's fantastic if you didn't learn it at home, that there's some place that you can.
Net.
Absolutely. But should it start at home? Agreed, 100%. That we really do need to have those conversations with our kids. And it's important for them to see and know how to navigate this space. How did your parents go through the decision making? Because we're not going to get it all right as parents. And quite frankly, it is a great thing for our kids to figure out that we did make some mistakes and they don't have to make the same ones.
I think too. And I look back and I don't know that my parents consciously taught me about their money values. They taught me how to balance a checkbook and things like that, but it's if you haven't had that necessarily, you need to figure out how to do it. A lot of our parenting skills come from reaction and what's in our memory as opposed to thinking about things. So how do you teach people about this? What's your advice?
Okay, so I talked about this in one of the segments we've done previously about using acronyms in order to address the conversation so we don't forget the various components that we need to utilize when we're teaching our kids about it. But of course we needed to start first as individuals, then as partners. Now finally, how do we have this conversation with our kids? And so the acronym that we used was CASH. C-A-S-H. We need to start with the communication component. Make sure that you do a family meeting with your kids. Let's all sit down together after we've done our parent meeting and we've figured out where we stand as partners, what it is that we want to talk to our kids about. Now, granted, if you're a single parent, then it's really about the personal examination that we've talked about before. Figure out where you are in this process before you have the conversation with your kids about it. If you are part of a team, then you and your partner sit down with your kids to have this conversation. But it's important that you let your kids be a part of the discussion because it matters. Oh, it's okay, because it's not over yet.
It's never nice over thing about being a parent
thing. It never ends. No, it doesn't. It never ends. So if you missed something, if you feel like you missed something, because we both have kids going to college. So if we feel like we've missed something, it's never too late to say, hey, listen, you're getting ready to go to this place in your life or this next stage in your life. And it occurred to me that I haven't talked to you about A, B, C, and D. Let's sit down and have this conversation now. Maybe a little later than I probably should have, but it doesn't change the fact that it's still useful. And I want you to know as a mom, as a dad, that it matters to me that we've had this discussion. So I don't care whether the kid is 2 or 20. The fact is that as long as we are parents, we're always going to be part of the process of being in the discussion with them in some form or fashion about where they're going.
Things on a different schedule.
It is
they
so
always
true.
Hear it when you say it the first 10 times. So
Agreed.
They have to be a little bit ready.
Agreed. And now as they get older, what they see and understand about that is going to be very different. When your kid is 5, we have to think about the developmental process. When they're 5 talking about money, really all they're trying to figure out is, can I get the candy, can I get the toy, can I get the game? That's all they care about. But when they're 18 and we're now talking about, can I pay my car insurance and my cell phone bill, it means something different. So if we miss the conversation early on, that never means not to have the conversation. It just means what we may be discussing in that conversation may be a little bit different. But we want to make them a part of it. We want to talk to our kids about it because we both want to share our values. Here's why mom and dad, or mom or dad, or grandma for that instance, here's why we are doing the things the way we're doing it. A lot of times we assume our kids understand that. Why we didn't go to the movies, why we didn't spend money on this, why we didn't, we assume they understand it.
Or we tell them, but we don't make it a discussion.
It's true.
We don't always.
It's true. So we could say things like, I have to pay the bills, so we didn't do so-and-so. But what does that really mean? Does that mean that I had it and I chose not to do it? Or does it mean that we're not doing it because I don't have it? Or does it mean that there are goals that we have that are more important than that short-term thing that we could have done?
Right.
But none of those things can be assumed. They have to be communicated about.
Okay.
So when we talk about that C, we're talking about communication as a family.
Okay.
And the other point is that young kids have some great ideas sometimes about what we might need to do as a family. Hey, Mom, what if we all cut coupons on Saturday? And if we save $20, can we spend that $20 to go get ice cream on such and such day, or to be able to go to a matinee movie? Kids are so creative that leaving them out of this discussion also leaves them out of the solution. So we want to make sure that we have it with everybody. So that's why I want to say that make sure you, even the little ones, it's not just about your teenagers. Bring
Right.
even the little ones to the table in the process.
All right, so communicate.
Communicate. Next, ask. We talk about the important questions that you have to ask. And the most important question when talking about money is always the want versus need conversation. It's the one we had to have as partners. What are my wants and needs as the mom or the dad in the process? What are my wants and needs as the one of the two partners? Because you may not even have children, but you're still a family.
Right.
So how do we figure that thing out? Well, the same thing is going to be true when we're talking about our kids. A lot of times because of their age, because of their perspective, because they haven't had jobs yet or don't know that it takes 6 hours of mom working to be able to pay for those sneakers that you think you want and is no big deal. We need to be able to have a discussion about whether or not this thing is a want or it's a need. Do we know the difference between those two spaces? For every kid, what I want is my need.
There's no, and I need it now, by the way.
Like yesterday.
Right.
So it is very true that if we don't have the conversations with them, they may not define those lines as clearly as we need them to define those lines. So we need to have that conversation. We need to discuss the difference between those two.
And to be
ask
able
that
to
important
say,
question.
Yes, sneakers are a need. You
Right.
need to have shoes that don't have holes in them, and you need gym class. But this versus this is the difference.
Do you need a $200 pair of sneakers?
Right.
Can those sneakers be just as effective at $50? So let's be honest about those things, but we have to be honest in a conversation that includes the people who are involved in the process. When we make arbitrary decisions, the executive decisions as we do as parents, look, this is what's going to happen. It may happen in that moment, but it hasn't provided information and or wisdom for the child in terms of how to navigate this thing beyond this moment. We as parents want to make sure we equip our kids to be able to make the right decisions when they're not with us. So if we don't bring them into the conversation, if we don't teach them to ask the important questions, if we don't figure out how to determine the difference between those wants and those needs, when we are now paying for things ourselves, we don't want to spend money at the movies hanging out with our girlfriend or boyfriend, and now we can't pay for our car insurance because we didn't know the difference between the want and the need. So it starts early on in the conversation. So you've got to ask those questions. Ask yourself the question, ask it to your partner, ask it to your kids. Then we move to the S, saving. Saving is a habit that has to be taught early. It's hard if you spent your whole life spending to suddenly become a saver. It's very hard. So if we don't develop those habits as early as humanly possible, we're going to find it more challenging when we recognize that we have to. We are now at ages where we're thinking about how we're going to afford our children going to college, then how we're going to afford our own retirements.
Right.
Well, those are all byproducts of saving. What was our orientation to the use of our money as we were growing? And if we have an orientation that says, spend some, enjoy it, because you should enjoy some of your money, but save a good portion of it also. That balance has a lot to do with our comforts later on in life. So we want to teach that to our kids as early as we can. And if you do have allowances for your kids, teaching them that, okay, if your allowance is $5, then let's take $1 and save it. Let's take $1 and do something good for somebody else. Let's take $1 and buy something for ourselves. And let's take $1 to do whatever you want to divide that portion up into. Make sure that you include savings in that process.
I will say, when the kids were little, I did this, they had 3 little jars or whatever. And one was, this is the money you get to spend.
Right.
This is the saving, and what are you saving for? Is
Right.
it a long-term project? And then there was, let's go for the H.
Yep. Help.
Help.
Are you going to help somebody else? Are you going to do something for someone else? It's so important, particularly because we are very active in our communities and understanding the role that you play. You're part of something bigger than yourself. And when we teach our kids early on that being a good community member isn't just about taking, but it's also about giving. And it's more about giving than it is about taking. The quality of your life, the happiness that you experience has a lot to do with the difference you've made in the world. And teaching your kids to do little things for other people early on is such an important character component to give your child.
Yeah.
So even though you may not have a lot, it's not about doing a lot. It's about doing something small a lot of times. It's the frequency more than it is the magnitude of it. But it is a cultural behavior. You've got to make that the culture of your family, that we do things for people other than ourselves. Whether it's doing something in the house versus doing something out in the community, that is your choice. But the idea is still the same.
Yeah.
Take something that you have and do something for someone other than yourself with it.
And we always let the kids pick where that money went. And I will say it didn't
Smart.
always go to people. Sometimes it went to
That's
the
okay.
SPCA.
That's okay.
Or, the animals at Bluebird Gap Farm or
That's
whatever.
okay.
But it was that, that giving back, and it was letting them choose and letting them feel that joy.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect word for it. Joy is absolutely right. Because there's something that is so great about doing something for somebody else or for a cause that matters to you. Because when you know that a dog didn't get put to sleep, if you're an animal lover, I have too. So if you know that you saved a life
Right.
with something that you donated, that feels fantastic. And for a kid, you feel powerful. Because a lot of times as little kids, you feel like what you need and what you want, they don't really make a difference because you can't control a lot. But when you get the idea and the notion that something that I had made a difference for somebody else, you feel big on the inside. And it's the same big feeling we feel as grown-ups when we make a huge difference in something. So I totally am with you. It doesn't really matter whether it's for a person or it's for a cause.
Right.
But what matters is, do you believe in helping? Do you believe in the value of giving to something more than yourself?
That's great. And I will say, okay, maybe I did teach him something, or maybe he just figured it out on his own, but my son just recently gave a Citizen of the Month speech to other students. And one of the things he said was, be generous. Be generous with your time, enjoy your friends, take care of people, buy them something if you can, or create that shared experience. But give and be a part of the community. So
Agreed. I think you got
maybe-
something right
maybe
there,
he
Robin.
did. Okay, so let's recap.
Let's recap. Okay.
It is cash.
Yes.
We're talking
That's the
about
acronym.
cash here.
And talking about money.
Well, do you believe in the allowance thing? Did you give allowance?
I have to be honest. I'm not always consistent with it.
Okay.
I was not consistent about the allowance. There are certain periods of time for my kids that it was very important because they were working towards something. So I gave them opportunities to earn working towards it. I am not of the belief that you are obligated to do allowance. I'm not of that belief. Everybody has different opinions, so this is just
Right,
strictly my
right.
own. But there are periods of time that there were so many things that the kids had going on, and there wasn't a lot of money to do everything. So it wasn't in the budget to be able to give you an allowance, but it was in the budget to support some of the things you wanted to do. So I'm not always about the allowance, but I am always about the conversation in terms of how we're going to use the money, and then being a part of knowing how that's going to be used, what the goals are in terms of what we've said, and why we're doing what we're doing, so that it's not just about a decision made from adults that's going to affect children, but it's a decision we made as a family.
And it does sort of teach them, if there's extra chores, if there's extra things they can do, it teaches you how to work for the money you want. And you have
agreed.
to learn to do that at some point.
It's very important
We
because
all
we don't
do.
want them all moving back home as adults.
That is true. Okay, so I derailed that, but
Okay.
we were trying to say
We're going to say cash. So
Communicate.
communicate about it as a family. Bring everybody in, know that developmentally it'll be different for each child, but let everybody be a part of the process because sometimes the little ones have the best ideas.
Yes.
A, ask.
Is it a
Ask
want
yourself the
or a
important
need?
questions. Exactly. Is it a want or a need?
Does it fit in with the long-term goals?
Does it fit in with our values? doesn't match what we value as a family. But we have to ask ourselves those questions. They need to know the difference, because knowing the difference between a want and a need can be the difference between struggling and being very successful financially later on in their lives.
Right.
Then S.
Save.
You've got to save. And saving's a habit. You've
It's
got
a
to
hard
start
thing, though.
early.
I got to tell you, I taught both kids. One is a saver. One has
Is
a
a
little
spender?
impulse control problem. You know, it'll get through
happens.
eventually, I think.
It happens.
But it's a hard thing to learn.
But you can't expect something to show up later that you never talked about in the
That's
beginning.
true.
So we need to at least talk about it. Ultimately, our kids are their own people, so they're going to determine who they want to be in the world. But we want to equip them with as much as we can before they go out into the world.
Okay.
So yes, we have to teach them to save. And then H,
Help.
help. We've got to make sure that we are creating a community, creating a culture in our families that's about more than just ourselves. And taking small amounts of what it is that you make to contribute to a good cause is a great way to build character, financial character, in our kids. So all of those things make a world of a difference. And I will say that in developing the skills to communicate about those things, youth education and family services, great way for you to be able to do it. While they're not going to get into the specifics about what you do with your money, they do equip you to have conversations about important things. So it is a great way to invest. The other thing that we have is our time
Right.
in order to be able to develop capacity as a family. So I always encourage people to check out the website. Go to the city websites to be able to find it. You can go to Healthy Families to be able to find out. But reach out, because there are great opportunities for you to develop new skills to get comfortable with those conversations.
Okay, so go to hampton.gov. It's either hampton.gov/YEF, or you can just look in there
Yeah,
under
you can Google
living
Healthy
or
Families.
under
There are lots of ways.
departments.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's important too. It's like the monthly meetings, it's the family meetings, it's the setting aside time to talk about it before
Absolutely.
it's an issue.
Absolutely.
When you're calm and when you can take some of the emotion out, or
Which
at least
makes-
identify the emotion.
Very true, which makes it really good when it comes time to have the tough conversations. If you've already developed the capacity while you're calm, it makes it much easier to be able to navigate the tougher, highly emotionally charged moments.
That's right. Okay, well, thank you very much, Alvion. I
Thanks.
appreciate it. And thank you for watching. I hope you've learned some tips for teaching financial literacy to your kids. Thank you.